people look at that painting 100 times and never notice that the man on the oar is an African American.
The Marbleheaders were a band of Black and indigenous people who came from Marblehead, Massachusetts. They had a very specialized skill set that they could manage these boats.
I remember being in high school and learning about American history, and I always felt that there was something left out. I really didn't feel like I was connected to the history that we were learning.
We weren't given the complete story. People in power wanted history to be slanted from their perspective, from the white lens. And so when you only have history coming from one source, from one white source, you don't get the full story.
George Washington really didn't want the Black troops. My version of it is after they got their butts kicked, then they said, well, maybe we better let some of the Black people come in and help us out. It's retelling the story so that it makes sense for people like me.
Right now, we're in a political period where it's under threat. I look at this kind of history and say it should never be under threat. These are the types of stories that everybody should know about. Every history book should have them. Every school child should know about the Marbleheaders. They should know about what happened on December 25th. At the beginning of our country, it was because of people of color. They were also part of the history. African American history is American history.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Curitan, and I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Historical Commission. It's my great pleasure to welcome you this evening. And I have to say, I've seen that clip so many times, and every time I see it, it hits me again. So I'm glad that we could share with you one of those videos that we created earlier in our preparations for the 250th with the wonderful story of and critical story of the Marbleheaders. So welcome again. And I wanted to point out that tonight's program is actually one of the many, many programs that we are offering as part of our commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, which we call RevolutionNJ. That is New Jersey's official planning initiative. As part of that, we thought very, very carefully at the beginning of our work about what the goals for this initiative should be. And we talked to a lot of community groups. And the number one goal that we have for RevolutionNJ is to tell a diverse and inclusive story of New Jersey that engages all New Jerseyans. So perhaps it's not surprising with a goal like that, that one of the very first projects we started is the one you're going to hear about tonight. We're really excited to share it with you. And that is to really bring together the resources, both primary and secondary, that tell these stories of African Americans, of Indigenous people, of women, and more. So it is an exciting night for us to share this with you. And to get us started, I'm delighted to turn the program over to Noelle Lorraine Williams, the director of the New Jersey Historical Commission's African American History Program. Over to you, Noelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are tuning in from. We're so happy to have you, and we're so happy to have the folks who will watch this video in the future. If you are not acquainted with the New Jersey Historical Commission's YouTube channel, we will put it in the chat. There you can find our past programming from the African American History Program, as well as conferences that we have hosted for the past several years. So I'm excited to share this information with as many audiences as we can. As Sarah Carrington expressed, my name is Noelle Lorraine Williams, and I'm happy on the behalf of the New Jersey Historical Commission's African American History Program and Black Heritage Trail to welcome you to tonight's program, Black Liberation in Revolutionary America, New Research and Scholarly Resources. As our executive director, Sarah Carrington, noted, our organization, the New Jersey Historical Commission, has partnered with Crossroads to steward the state's commemoration of the 250th birth date of the United States. And the name of the entity is RevolutionNJ. The commission fulfills our mission through various initiatives and programs, educational workshops and panels, but as well as through an active grant program. So please learn more about that if you're not acquainted. The goal of our grant program is to engage diverse audiences and practitioners in the active exploration, enjoyment, interpretation, understanding, and preservation of New Jersey history. As far as the African American History Program, we administer the Black Heritage Trail, New Jersey's first statewide Black Heritage Trail. We also direct the administration of the Mildred Barry Garvin Prize, which celebrates the works of teachers, librarians, and other folks who promote African American history in schools and libraries throughout the state. Our application deadline will open again next year, so please consider applying. We also consult on projects and initiatives like the one you are here for tonight, RevolutionNJ, as well as the annual Marion Thompson Wright Lecture, which happens every year in the winter. So please join our mailing list so you can receive information about that. Our mandate, along with folks around the country for this upcoming commemoration, is really to have a deeper historical inquiry into the lives of people of African descent during the Revolutionary era up to now. Our goal is to define what Black liberation was, or it might have been, to go deeper into their stories. Though this bibliography will be best used by high school, upper levels, college, universities, or adults, community historians, or other folks who would just like to learn more, we plan next year to also present and take this research in creating more public-facing engagement for younger folks as well. So one of the things I would like to do is that James will explore this more in today's presentation, but we've also completed an online companion to the bibliography, and we will share that link in the chat at the end of the program. So the online presentation basically has all of the information that the PDF does. We introduce it with a very important theme that we look forward to exploring over the next 2 years. It's a quote from soldier Samuel Sutphin, where he says, "I was put in master's place, and I was willing that I might be a free man when the war was over." When we look at African American engagement during the Revolutionary War, we see their steps for freedom and liberation from enslavement, and also from second-class citizenship for those who were free. And so we have these parallel freedoms that are occurring during the Revolutionary War that simply can't be satisfied by just saying some of the soldiers were of a darker hue. Rather, there's a framework around liberation that needs to have a deeper exploration over the next 2 years that will be rewarding for us as scholars and as just folks who are interested in history, but also in understanding what it means to be American today and how did we really get to where we are. So here you will be able to see an introduction and an overview to the bibliography. You can access this piece by scrolling through the page. There's also left and right arrows. We've also highlighted some of our other agencies that we work with in the cultural complex, and that's the New Jersey State Archives and the New Jersey State Library. There are so many rich resources for researchers in New Jersey, but also throughout the United States and other places to really understand and go deeper. Many thanks to my colleague, Dr. James Amemasor, who bravely took this project on and really did a deep dive in what I would consider to be a kind of a bird's eye view of when and where we enter. Some of you may be familiar with that term. Paula Giddings used it for her book on African-American women's history, almost, I guess, approximately 30 years ago. And basically where she charted, where do African-American women enter into this narrative? James has done a similar thing. And so there are some stories that some of us may know, and then also newer stories that are deeply complicated. And some of them are very refreshing, and other ones are deeply meditative, but they give us all opportunity to have a fresh new take on understanding the revolution. And so you'll find every single chapter here and available. You will click on the blue button, and the blue button will take you to the page to read more. Again, this information is available on the download of the bibliography. You can also use your Google browser to search. So the 3 dots on the right can be used for this. So we will put this link in the program at the end, and we will also send it to all of the participants. And now the moment of the hour is at hand. So I would love to introduce you all to our presenters, Dr. James Amemasor with Rutgers University, Newark, and Dr. Daniel Broyld with Claiming Freedom, National Park Service. And they will both present. And I will start off with an introduction to Dr. James Amemasor, one of New Jersey's most foremost specialists and scholars on African-American history here, but as well as just, you know, a giving scholar. And so Dr. James Amemasor currently serves as a research specialist at the New Jersey Historical Society, the oldest, largest, and privately held archives of New Jersey's materials in the world. He uses the Society's collections and public databases to provide personalized assistance to a wide range of researchers. He has served in this role since 2007. James received a PhD in Global Affairs and International Relations from Rutgers University, an MA in History from Illinois State University, and a BA in History from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. In addition to his work at the New Jersey Historical Society, Amemasor serves as an adjunct professor at Rutgers University, and he previously taught in the Department of Political Science at Rutgers University in Newark, in the Federated Department of History at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Prior to his graduate studies, he served as an education officer at the Cape Coast Castle Museum, a former slave dungeon and UNESCO World Heritage Site in Ghana. He has presented research papers at national and international conferences and was featured in The Traces of the Trade, A Story from the Deep North, a documentary film retracing the role of the DeWolf family of New England in the transatlantic slave trade, initial release in 2008, and Insurance, Putting Newark on the Map, in 2016, and a documentary celebrating the 350th anniversary of Newark's founding. And this biography does not include the 10 other projects that I'm familiar with, that James has consulted on, including work dealing with research at Stevens Institute of Technology and Enslavement there, as well as the 313 Project in Elizabeth, New Jersey, as well as the Harriet Tubman Monument here in Newark. But I will stop there because this program is only so long. So James, thank you for coming and welcome. And thank you very much for working on this project.
Thank you, Noelle. And thanks to everybody for making it to this event. I'm going to share my screen and then talk about the project. Hope this is the screen. Okay, that's good. So give me a second, please. All right. Again, thank you, Noelle, and thanks to the New Jersey Historical Commission for hiring me as a consultant on this project. When Noelle advertised the position, I applied and I was interviewed for it. Not because I am an expert in anything really, let alone New Jersey revolutionary history. I became a New Jersey historian somehow by default, or maybe not by plan, because of the work I do at the New Jersey Historical Society, where my personal interest has been documenting the evidence of people of African descent, their presence and their institutions and their struggles for freedom in New Jersey from the very beginning. So when this came up, I said, okay, well, this is going to fit into my work as well. Why don't I take it on? Before then, I'd never really saw myself, I said that today somewhere, that I never really saw myself or identify myself with revolutionary history, largely because I did not see myself in it or the narrative as a Black person or someone of African descent. But increasingly, it's becoming very interesting, and I am doing more and more to actually help other people. So this is the project. Now, when I started this project, I was thinking about the revolutionary scene in New Jersey, and I consulted a number of books. One of them is the Encyclopedia of American Revolution, published in 1966 by Mayo Botner. And in this, he said at some point that in 1775, the 13 colonies had a population of about 2,000 or 2 million, 2.2 million, let me put it that way, excluding Indians, and then excluding Indians and including about 500,000 Negro slaves. But he also went on to say that there were a good many free Black people, or Negroes, as they used to call them those days. At the outset of the Revolutionary War, Black people served in patriotic ranks, and the percentage increased as the years went by. The substitute system, which permitted a man to send his slave into the ranks, naturally accounted for the presence of many Negroes in the American armies. But many colored soldiers were free men who had volunteered. For instance, Washington's army is said to have an average of about 50 Black people per battalion, and at least 700 were among the 13,500 troops in the Mammoth campaign in 1778. So this was the beginning. And then I thought, well, quite a number of things here. First and foremost, the number of enslaved people in the 13 colonies. Not only that, there were a good many free Black people. So what happened to them? And at the outset, Black people served increasingly in the war, and the substitute system also helped them. So this was the beginning of the work, and I wanted to look for more information and see what else is there. So I went around, found some other sources. Again, as I said, I was not too enthusiastic about Revolutionary War until then. Then I found other sources like services of colored Americans in the wars of 1776 and 1812, written by a man called William C. Neal, and this was published in 1851. Then he published another book called The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. And of course, with sketches of several distinguished colored persons. And this was published in 1856 in Boston. So therefore, we have some books out there, published materials about Black people's representation in the Revolutionary War. And of course, this individual, the author, I read about him, said that he was a Black man himself, served, and so he had written these books. And a historian commented that this is possibly or probably the first book that was written by an African American about the military engagement of African people. Truly remarkable work. So I went forward to look at other sources. So if that is the case, what about the other sources broadly? And I found a book that appealed to me called The Creation of the American Republic, 1776-1787, written by a very famous historian, Gordon S. Wood, who had published broadly about the American Revolution. One of his books is called The Radicalism of American Revolution. So I look at this book, it's over 600 pages, trying to find out if there are some references to people of African descent. There was nothing really. One reference was about the fact that freedom itself is not known in Africa. I think that was the only thing. The second index to people of African descent had to do with Massachusetts. During the Revolutionary War, they were struggling whether Black people should have the right to vote. These were two references that are found in a 600-page volume. And I thought, well, what else is there? I know for a fact that Black people's presence in the United States, largely in New Jersey specifically, you have to go through records of agents of enslavement to find references about them, because that's what I do, basically. Track down information from all kinds of sources and document them for other people to use. So when I look around, as I said, this book did not contain anything, and therefore, what else could I do? Now, I had to face the project itself, the goal of it. Now, the goal largely, as it was defined, was to just compile bibliographic resources about the roles and conditions of people of African descent, Native Americans, and women and children in Revolutionary era New Jersey, and to provide a comprehensive source of information that can help almost every researcher, anybody who is interested, to have some light about the contributions of marginalized people to the consolidation and advancement of New Jersey's freedom ideals, and also promote some inclusive analysis and interpretations of, a fuller appreciation of the broader human experience in New Jersey during this time. And more importantly, sources that can give us a sense of what life was like for people of African descent, Native Americans, and of course, women during this time period. As you could see from my first or second slide, Native Americans were not included. They were not counted by 1775. Those who were not taxed were not counted. So what was it like for individuals like that, or marginalized people in New Jersey? Now, looking thoroughly, said, well, what about the Revolutionary era? What do we mean by that? So I have to actually have an idea what we were trying to do. The Revolutionary era in this sense, in this context, refers to 1775 through 1810. Well, 1775, there's no question about that. But what about 1810? What is it about? And so my understanding is that there were some major transformational processes, events, and legislations throughout this time period that really tested and shaped and refined and of course, strengthened revolutionary principles in New Jersey. And these events and processes included the Revolutionary War itself and the close of it from 1775 through 1783, the adoption of New Jersey Constitution. New Jersey adopted this constitution on the 2nd of July, 1776, 4 days before the United States declared itself independent. And of course, the Declaration of Independence in the United States, the Constitutional Convention that happened in 1787, and a ratification of it, 1789. Then more importantly, there were legislative acts that expanded and constrained the meaning of or the boundaries of freedom in New Jersey. And also This was a time period where we saw enlistment of servants and apprentices to serve in New Jersey battalions that were fighting a continental war. Also, this was the period where, as I said earlier, substitute system, which was a system that allowed slave owners to send their enslaved people to fight on their behalf, those who could not go to war themselves, and people who will actually pay for other people to fight the battles for them. And of course, this was also a period where legislations were passed, particularly a law to prevent importation of captured Africans into New Jersey, and also authorized manumission of some of them on certain conditions. We also saw this time period covering the sweeping, what I call the most sweeping slavery-related law that was passed in New Jersey as a state, dated 1798. And of course, 1804, New Jersey became the last northern state to pass what was regarded as gradual abolition of slavery law. And then, of course, 1810 is what we're thinking about. But this also represents the unprecedented increase in the free Black population of New Jersey relative to the number of enslaved people in the state. And I will show that in a second. So this is what I mean by the time period or revolutionary era, 1775 through 1810, excuse me. And so what do I mean by that? Looking through the sources, census records for the time 1832 shows that the first census conducted in the United States, 1790, and enslaved people in New Jersey were about 2,762. I mean, free people, 2,762. The slaves were 11,423. By 1800, all other free persons, excluding Indians, not taxed, 4,402. And then enslaved people were 12,422. By 1810, all other free persons, excluding Indians, not taxed, that means Black people, was 7,843. Slaves were 10,851. So you can see here, the reason why 1810 is the cutoff point as the revolutionary era in New Jersey is that enslaved people, the number of people who were enslaved dropped relative to Black people who were becoming free by 1810 census. So that is why, and that represents about 184% increase of free Black people from the first census, which was conducted in 1790. So that was the cutoff point. Now, when I look through the other records, largely, of course, as I said, you have to look through records that are out there to find any evidence of Black people's experience in New Jersey broadly. But there were other resources there. One of them was about the Black presence in America during the Revolutionary War era. And in there, I found a discharge certificate for a Black man called Oliver Cromwell, who was born in Burlington, and he joined the Revolutionary War, he served for 6 years. And his discharge certificate was signed by George Washington himself on June 5th, 1783. And so they're very important, but you don't find a specific book or one book that documents all things like this. So therefore, you have to look for bits and pieces of information. There was another book that I found that recorded, Black people who were in the military by 1778, specific date. This was just a return covering how many Black people served. And again, you don't find this comprehensively in any source other than to find out what else is out there for you to look at. Sorry about that. So with all these bits and pieces of information, how do I approach this work? That means I have to compile what I call bibliographic references rather than bibliographic, bibliographic references, we'll put it that way, because they are references more than just a bibliographic essays. And doing so with liberally quoted passages with minimum of editorial comments, and doing so focusing on the revolutionary era experiences and conditions of people of African descent, Native Americans, women and children, and doing so revealing the impact that these experiences had on the revolutionary ideals in New Jersey as well. So this was the goal. Now, with the research itself, what I did was to think about what kind of research terms I should use. So broadly, Africa, African Americans, or African, Afro-Americans, American Indian, Black American, Black man or Black boys, Black men, Black women, colored Americans, colored soldiers, all the terms you can think of, mulatto, servants, Negro man, Negro woman, right, to look through relevant records of the time. So I ended up having an idea what to do. And this is the table of content of the work that has been done. All right, so you see part of it, introduction, and I'll walk you through very soon, introduction. Then New Jersey legislative acts referencing people of African descent from 1775 through 1810. Then general sources referencing people of African descent, the Revolutionary era. And then, of course, general sources referencing women and children, and legislative acts focusing on Native Americans who, from the very beginning, were not counted or were excluded, especially those who were not taxed. So we're bound not to have a lot of records about them. And then, of course, general sources referencing Native Americans in the Revolutionary War, and then manuscript materials, primary sources that are out there about women, African Americans, and children. Now, this is what I have done. Hopefully, I have time to go through this. Now, one of the first records I saw was the Black Men and Early New Jersey Militia, published by Robert Gow in Proceedings of the New Jersey Historical Society, volume 88, number 4. This was 1970. And it talks extensively about the fact that, and I'll read part of this, New Jersey was one of the states with mixed ranks, meaning there was no separate rank for Black people like we saw in Rhode Island. Black people mixed up with white people to fight the Revolutionary War. Wartime legislation relating to and raising troops evidenced the willingness of white New Jerseyans to allow Blacks to fight in the Revolutionary War. In establishing liability for service, the Militia Act of 1777 used the broad phrase, all effective men between 15 and 50, without reference to race. An amendment to this legislation passed the following March, called upon, quote, all able-bodied men not being slaves for service. Free Blacks were still eligible, and many saw service. So I said, okay, well, this is very interesting because New Jersey did not have a separate rank for Black people. Therefore, there was a mixed rank, which tells us that possibly a lot of Black people served with their full names because they were free Black people, yet they did not identify them in the records because there was no separate regiment for them. And as you can see, later in the war, legislation was adopted, providing for the raising of special units in specific areas of the state. An act of 1779 limited recruits in one of these units to a male-free inhabitants. What this is telling us is that the laws regulating recruitment of Black people to serve or regulating the war, Revolutionary War broadly, was really complicated. It was not straightforward at all, and that has been the case with New Jersey. Now, I went further to look at other sources. If laws were really complicated, then we need to look at legislative acts in New Jersey. And what we do by looking at New Jersey Provincial Congress minutes and Provincial Congress and Council of Safety and see what is there. Now you could see here that the gentleman whose work I had referenced to earlier, a few minutes ago, was right on target because 1775, New Jersey passed a law and called for able-bodied effective men to be enlisted and enrolled. What does this mean? Able-bodied men, there was no reference to race, and therefore Black people possibly served. Because from my first slide, we're made to understand that there were free Black people in New Jersey and served broadly in other areas. Now, so you can see what I have done with these quotes. These are basically quotes coming from the sources, but I have editorial comments. And this is what it says. Here is an example of an early revolutionary era law using the broad phrase able-bodied effective men without reference to race. Scholars are generally of the view that such laws allowed for free Black men to be recruited for the revolutionary cause. Such explains why some Black men listed for the war very early in time, like Oliver Cromwell. Now, you can also see here that these are other laws that were passed 1776. And of course, there's a reference here that all able-bodied men, without exception, in this state, between the ages of 16 and 50, right? That again tells us that, look, New Jersey was open to recruiting Black men because there was no reference to race. And that explains why very early Black people served in the Revolutionary War in New Jersey. Although there are no records about them, hopefully, we can find some of them. Now, you can also see here that the question of citizenship, which is really what was of interest to me personally, because regarding New Jersey, this is a book that was published by a man called George Livermore. It was a speech that he gave to Massachusetts Historical Society in 1862. And it talks about the fact that New Jersey was really pivotal in some of the decisions that were made when Congress was, or when scholars, leaders were preparing what the Constitution was going to be, particularly with regard to the importation of slaves into New Jersey or to the United States. There was a suggestion that enslaved people or captured Africans should not be brought into a country, but the deadline was 1808. And this was very controversial, but what happened was that New Jersey voted against that measure. I'm not quite sure why New Jersey did that, because by 1786, New Jersey passed a law to prevent Africans who were captured being brought to New Jersey. But why would New Jersey veto or vote against the importation of Black people by 1808? It's not clear to me. But when you go further, you also see that the issue of whether Black people were citizens in New Jersey was not doubted from the very beginning. Yet, New Jersey played a very big role during the Constitutional Convention to make sure that the idea of Black people becoming citizens was not entertained. Why that was the case, I have not been able to establish that fully. I just want to draw attention. So New Jersey objects to the omission of Negroes being citizens. And so you can see there are some of the sources here and what they have to say. Now about recruitment of Blacks, and I'll wrap up this quickly. There is this one article that I found that talks about enlistment, continental soldiers, and it was a PhD dissertation written in 1975. And it talks extensively about the fact that Black people were recruited, and despite a series of resentments, petitions, and the state refused to grant them exceptions from militia duty, recruiters have problems. So what they did was that they had to rely on runaway servants to serve in the Revolutionary War. Now, runaway servants served in the Revolutionary War, other Black people, enslaved people, because they were recruiters. And that is very important when it comes to how, when, at what point were these laws passed? Were they laws at all? Yes, there were laws asking that people or bought servants or enslaved people could be listed by virtue of an act that was passed in 1777, for instance, very early. There was a need for New Jersey war leaders to do that. And so they relied on recruiters, and the recruiters played a very important role in doing so. So this brings us to a very important document. This is about Cudjoe, Jack Cudjoe. Most of us probably on this forum here know about him. We are working very hard to celebrate him, his achievements next year. We can talk about that in greater detail later. But this, you can see here that this was the certificates of his enlistment. His name, Cudjoe, Thomas John, and he came with different names. Now, when you look at the original, when you look at the official records, You see variety of names, Cujo, Thomas, Cujo, Jack, and Cujo and others, which is very hard to decipher who this individual was. Did we have more than 2 Cujos or 3 or 4 Cujos serving in the Revolutionary War in New Jersey? It turned out it was the same person, but why? We have different names like Thomas John, and then we have also a name here called Cujo Thomas and Cujo John. Did we have different Cujos, as I said? No, it turned out that likely one person, but recruiters were required to sign their names against whoever they recruited as an enslaved person or runaway slaves because recruiters got paid. Now, the reason why I'm raising this is that this is very, very, very important. It will help us to go back to the literature to establish the identity of Black people who served in the Revolutionary War, largely because wherever they went, recruiters' names have to be attached. Once they switched a battalion or company, that recruiter's name has to be attached to them. So here you have Thomas. Cujo was never called Thomas. He was just called Cujo or Jack Cujo. But here's a Thomas, because Thomas was an officer or a recruiter whose name was attached. So he could get paid wherever Cujo served. Now, besides that, I know we don't have time, but what about women and children? I have some highlights here that the late Miss Sarah Clark, the Society of Friends with a colored woman for an assistant, took care of General Amemasor. All right, so there were other people who were playing very big role. These individuals, Larry Gellag wrote about them and said, in their anonymity, they are typical of the countless nameless and faceless men and women upon whose shoulders the success or failure of the revolution rested. This is very important because that is the case. These are women taking care of generals, but we don't hear about them in the literature. Here you can also see the portion that is highlighted. This is about a little Negro on horseback galloping down the hill who called to us that the British Army was before us. Very sensitive information provided. But who was this Negro boy? That's all we know about this individual, right? Breathing out of history completely. Now, there are other individuals broadly, and I'm going to wrap this up quickly by saying that there was a Negro man called Joe who died at the age of 113 years, but he did a lot. He played a role in the Revolutionary War, the French War. We don't know much about him. He's one of those endless, nameless individuals whose shoulders the revolution rested. Now, very importantly, here is a document about a Black woman who was called Hagar. She was reported to be an old colored woman born and enslaved in Newark, New Jersey, and was raised in Stamford, Connecticut. Her exact age was not known, but she was believed to be about 100 years old when she died. But more importantly, she cooked for General Washington on his way to the headquarters of the American Army in Massachusetts. And she did the cooking in Connecticut. Very important that there was another source that referenced about her death. She grew up in Connecticut, died, and a newspaper registered or wrote about her death. These were individuals that we don't hear about, but they did a lot to advance the revolutionary principles. Very importantly, in brief, Black people served in different capacities. For instance, the Black soldier and sailor of the revolution, whether he fought for Congress, king, or served in a variety of ways as an infantryman, artilleryman, he was a scout, guide, a spy, guard, courier, wagoner, orderly, cook, waiter, ableman, privateersman, military labor of all sorts. In a few cases, Blacks formed their own units. This is from a book called The Black Presence in the Era of American Revolution. But how many were killed or wounded, we can only guess. Some were heroes not long after they had fallen. Most of them were forgotten. The white memory of things recorded in print and paint usually left them out. I found this very important, very, very interesting. And as a way to bring this to a close, here is a reflection from another source by John Whittier, Black Men in the Revolutionary War, published in the National Era, 1847, where he said, and I'll read this: "When we see whole nation doing honor to the memories of one class of its defenders, to the total neglect of another class who had the misfortune to be the darker complexion, we cannot forego the satisfaction of inviting notice to certain historical facts. One of the services and sufferings of the colored soldiers of the Revolution, no attempt has, to our knowledge, been made to preserve a record. This is mainly true. Their history is not written. It lies upon the soil, watered with their blood. Who shall gather it? It rests with their bones in the charnel house. Who shall exhume it?" Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, James, for that. It's, you know, one of the things I thought was significant, and well, all of the things you said were significant, but that made me think of the exhibition the New Jersey Historical Commission is developing for RevolutionNJ, is our traveling exhibition that highlights the lives of people who were not necessarily considered to be like the heroes or you know, Washington or other folks who were dominant in many of these narratives, but what we call like the everyday people, including African Americans and other folks who were a part of this struggle. So we look forward to sharing that exhibition along with the story of Oliver Cromwell with the public. It will be available to travel to schools and other institutions, so people will be able to borrow it. So please join our mailing list, and so you can all know about that. But thank you again, James. I put the link for the resource in the chat, and this will also be sent out on our mailing list to everyone, along with the notes in the YouTube video. So thank you, James. And now I would like to present our other guest for the evening, Dr. Dan J. Broyld. He is with Claiming Freedom, a new initiative of the National Park Service, and is an associate professor of African American history at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Oh. He earned his PhD in 19th century United States and African diaspora history at Howard University. His work focuses on the American-Canadian borderlands and issues of Black identity, migration, and transnational relations, as well as oral history, material culture, and museum community interactions. Broyld was a 2017 to 18 Fulbright Canada Scholar at Brock University, and his book, Borderland Blacks, Two Cities in the Niagara region during the final decades of slavery, 2022, was published with the Louisiana State University Press. Borderland Blacks recently won the Ontario Historical Society's 2022 to 2023 Fred Landon Book Award. I would like to welcome Dr. Broyld, but first I would like to say our last program had a presenter from the Black Heritage Society in Nova Scotia, discussing the African Americans who fought with the Loyalists and their stories in Nova Scotia. So now this is our second program highlighting this, and I'm really excited for 2026 in that sense, because we will get to hear more of this story. And that is just an exciting thing for folks to know about. So welcome, Dr. Broyld.
Cheers all. Thank you so much, Noelle, for inviting me to share what the Claiming Freedom Project is doing. We work with the Network to Freedom. We work with the National Park Service, and also we're affiliated with ASALA as well. I wanted to this evening introduce you to my research team that's basically undertaking celebrating the A250, which is coming up in 2026. I work with a number of researchers, a young research team that has fresh and new ideals. Celeste Keefe is an individual that I work with, William Kelly, Deasia Noble, and also Mo Thornton. I also have the privilege of working with MPS Mellon postdoc scholars Kelly Barnes and Joshua Strayhorn as well. I am the external project manager for the Claiming Freedom project. The internal project manager, meaning the person that works for the MPS internally, is Kamal McLaren. And so they brought me on to kind of help push the research forward with this great and dynamic research team that I work with. So our goal and really our initiative, Claiming Freedom, began in 2022. The National Underground Railroad Network basically began a multi-year project to coincide with the A250, the Declaration of Independence that will be celebrated in 2026. The project is really there to highlight untold stories of enslaved Blacks seeking freedom during the Revolutionary era. We look at everything from military service to self-emancipation, and really what we do is kind of in the light of what Harvey Armani Winfield has done for the Book of Negroes in his recent book, of kind of creating these biographical sketches of individuals that were fighting or seeking freedom during this time period. Also, we have created databases to kind of log, and much in the way that you guys have in New Jersey, these stories and individuals, how they show up in kind of military records or in census data, etc. And so the project is again there to explore these stories that have really not been highlighted and kind of in the past. And so we're really just trying to kind of bring light to these dynamic stories. I find, when you study slavery, Ira Berlin, I like to use as kind of generations of enslavement. He talks about the kind of charter generation, the plantation generation, and he also spends time in the revolutionary generation, and then he also discusses the migration generation and the freedom generation. And this is kind of a good way to, look at enslavement from, kind of 1619, if you will, or that time period to the American Civil War. And I just find the Revolutionary era is such an interesting time of like ideals about liberty, equality, equity. And so, I think of it almost in terms of the way that W.E.B. Du Bois thought of Reconstruction, where he said that Blacks stood a moment in the sun and then went back into the darkness. Because this was such a moment, and so many Black people were able to kind of seize this moment of chaos to get freedom, whether they were fighting for the Patriots or whether they were fighting behind, British lines, or whether they were just because their owners were away, them simply kind of walking off of their plantations. And also seeing, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and also the Haitian Revolution during this time. It was really this kind of watershed moment. But you would see in the migration generation, the slaveholding powers kind of reassert their control, in the coming generations. And so I'm just so happy that we get this opportunity to kind of pause and to look at this moment in time with kind of new lenses, right? If we can create a new version of the future, why can't we create a new version of the past, right? This transforms history from being merely events that occurred in the past in a record that guides the future. And so I'm really just really excited that I get to work with young people to kind of find these new stories and excavate, these stories to kind of tell a new story of America and what people were doing during this time period. So I really, seeing what New Jersey is doing, I've been seeing what states have been doing throughout the United States, and I really think it's just honorable work because I mean this is a time period that we need to kind of excavate to find more of these dynamic stories of people like African Americans, Native Americans, and women and other people that were wedged into this time period. So Claiming Freedom, we work with a number of partners as far as the National Endowment for the Humanities. We also work with historically Black colleges and universities. A number of my interns are from historically Black colleges and universities, and so giving them an opportunity to do research. We also work with the Network to Freedom, which has over 800 sites throughout 39 states. We also have sites in Washington, D.C., and in the Virgin Islands, as well in the Caribbean. I believe in New Jersey, we have some 6 sites. So it's still work to be done in the state of New Jersey. We were under an agreement with the Greening You Foundation, but as of September 2024, Claiming Freedom is now partnered with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH. So we work directly with ASALH to bring these stories forward. So our research team, this information was gathered from kind of research statements that was collected in February of this year, and it really kind of highlights the collective conclusions of what we have done as a research team thus far. I must say that I was just hired in February as an external project manager for this project, and so I'm fairly new to the team. I think I'm the newest member of the team, and so I wanted to kind of put this together to kind of sum up what we have done thus far. So the Network to Freedom team that has been assembled is really a dynamic research team that can clearly tell these untold stories of people seeking freedom during the American Revolutionary Era. We define that era from like 1750s to 1820s, kind of broadly speaking. As of February 2024, the research team has already produced important works on little-known individuals in African American history. For instance, Harry Washington. We've done a story map on George Washington's enslaved man, who was well known for his freedom-seeking efforts. We've also done a study on the Reno LaForce Adams family, a story of a multi-generational freedom seeking that took one enslaved family into Native American lands and then into present day Ohio. And then we have done research on Tom Copper, who spearheaded a slave rebellion in the Dismal Swamp, known as the Easter Conspiracy of 1802. In addition, the interns and researchers have created lesson plans to investigate slave runaway ads. And also we have developed a database on John Redcoat and crafted a new Junior Rangers booklet to illustrate the works of Claiming Freedom and the Network to Freedom as well. The research team has kind of concentrated in several areas. We have done a lot of work in the Mid-Atlantic or Chesapeake area up to Philadelphia. We've also done some work in Ohio, and a large conglomerate of our research team is from the state of North Carolina, or does research on North Carolina. So we have done a lot of work there. And then we also have one of our researchers stationed right now in the Caribbean. So we're very happy to kind of, cover these areas, and we're looking for, new spaces to inhabit. So the research team is strongest in North Carolina, the U.S. Mid-Atlantic and Caribbean islands, which helps to undermine the dominant narrative of, Black freedom seekers just kind of going north. It kind of diversifies the narrative of, people fighting for greater freedom. And also it gets away from the kind of heavy focus on the border states of Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and Kentucky. The team has also covered the Atlantic Ocean coastline, the Caribbean islands, and it has really shown a deeper, and they have really shown a deeper interest in the African diaspora in the Atlantic world, history demonstrating a kind of transnational and international story about the Revolutionary era, as well as understanding, various routes to freedom. Several of the researchers have done work involving the Gullah people, British Canada, Quakers, and also skilled enslaved Black laborers. They have investigated themes as far as landscape, maroonage, area studies, Afrofuturism, youth and young adult education have also been addressed by the research team. You can see that the research team, as of right now, has worked with several national park sites. We've also worked with state parks as well, and some of them are listed on this slide. The main thing that I wanted to point your attention to is the Claiming Freedom website, which our research, once it's finished, will be produced on this website. And so we have tabs to kind of introduce our research team, but we also have tabs that talks just about freedom seekers. We also have an Underground Railroad handbook. You'll see that the Harry Washington story map is there, which has all types of infographics and maps and charts that kind of tracks his movement over time and space. And then we just have like new stories on like Tom Copper and the Dismal Swamp rebellion that he planned and executed. We also have a piece that was recently put up on Forrest Joe. I mean, these are individuals that like people don't really know about in this revolutionary era, that the researchers have created articles on. They also included like pictures and maps to go along with these articles. So kind of taking some of that, the raw materials of primary documents and kind of, drawing out these sketches for us has been really a labor of love and of toil for all of us, but we're really excited to be doing this type of work. And we just released part one of an article written by our researcher, William Kelly, on Black freedom seeking during the War of 1812. I believe that part two will be released on November 18th, Monday, November 18th. The second part of this article will be released as well. Then, probably most important for New Jersey, we have one of our Mellon Fellows, Kelly Barnes, has been working on a site called Invisible Architects of Freedom, a digital archive. And this is all about, freedom seeking in the city of Philadelphia. And so it has primary resources there on the website. It also has worksheets, pictures, maps, and things of that nature that are on this website. So it might be very useful for people that are researching the state of New Jersey. But this is the Claiming Freedom project. Again, working with the National Park Service, working with Claiming Freedom, and also working with ASALH. I'm really excited to be working with young adults that have kind of new ideals about the revolutionary period. So it's been my pleasure to join you all this evening.
Great. Thank you, Dan, Dr. Broyld. I would like to ask James to come for question and answer. Before we start question and answer, first, I want to say thank you to Dr. Broyld. One of the interns, Celeste Keith, has been working with one of our grantee and first approved nomination Black Heritage Trail sites, the Peter Mott House. If you're not aware, the borough of Lawnside, we marked the borough of Lawnside as an approved nomination for our initial round of the Black Heritage Trail. And we're so grateful that Celeste could work with the Peter Mott House in helping to do more research. We know that the folks in Lawnside have been working so hard to preserve their history as the first Black incorporated town in the state of New Jersey. So we're very excited about that. Another thing that came up when Dr. Broyld was presenting is he shared the image of James Fortin in Philadelphia watching the revolutionary soldiers go by. And one of the great things that I think we should definitely emphasize during this period is the national and international nature of freedom during this period. Well, freedom has always been national and international, trans islands across nations. And it's interesting because we have many of Fortin's relatives represented by Dolly Marshall and others who live near Lawnside and in the Camden area, and who were actually a part of the Museum of the American Revolution exhibition. But really, these things have come up during this talk, how we can go both deeper locally, but also recognizing these cross-state and cross-national ideas. So I would love for folks, 6 new messages, to put any questions in the chat and Rachel will share them. And I know we're closing at 7:55. So I guess we'll start. I don't see any questions yet. So I guess I'll start with my question. And I would love to know, because Dr. Amemasor and Dr. Broyld have been studying these range of things for so long, what has been the most surprising finding aspect of the research to you in the last year with regard to African Americans in the Revolutionary War? What has surprised you the most in your scholarship that you didn't quite expect? And I don't know, maybe there isn't anything that surprised you, but I would love for you to share that with us.
All right, sure. If I may go first, is that okay, Dan?
Yes, absolutely.
That's good. Thank you. Yes, very surprising. Yeah, everything broadly, because as I said, as a Black man, American Revolution, I did not see myself in a narrative to begin with, which reminds me of something someone said recently when she was telling a story about Jack Cudjoe. And then, of course, a Black girl who was sitting with her father was not paying attention to Revolutionary War broadly until she mentioned a Black man called Jack Cudjoe. And of course, the little guy was so enthused and wanted to know more where she could find information and things like that. So I feel the same. Now I see myself, because I see the African ancestors, African Americans participated, and they are being recognized, which is a good thing. Their stories have to be exhumed, as I said in my last slide, and that is the job we are doing. But there's so much to be uncovered. One of those was about a Black man who was recruited from Middlesex County, I think New Brunswick area there. I forgot the Spotswood, to be specific. Spotswood, New Jersey. And then when I was doing my research, I came across the information in a manuscript material that listed him. It was a listment document. About 28 people were listed who were recruited. And then the last person on the list was named Simon A. Black. So I saw that Simon A. Black with the article A. So I was wondering, what is that, Simon A. Black? And of course, there was no column for him with his physical description, but the other guys, 28, they all had their physical descriptions, their height and things like that. So I was wondering, who could this individual be, Simon A. Black? And so I decided to look around, didn't find anything. And my colleague, Greg Guderian, who was there at that time, I said, Greg, this is very strange, Simon A. Black. So he suggested, why don't you look at the Black official name, you know? He suggested that. So I look around, and I found a name, Simon Black. So I had to go back and look at other sources. It turned out that he was a Black man who was listed, recruited, and fought in the Revolutionary War. And not only in the Revolutionary War, but in a state level also he participated. But in the official record, he became Simon Black. And there was no indication that he was a Black man. And so that was surprising. So Greg, my friend Greg, said, well, jokingly, because Greg is a white guy, he said jokingly that Simon Black was completely whitewashed in the records. And that's how I feel. And that is true. And that's what I was trying to emphasize in my presentation, that because there were no clear-cut rules in New Jersey, there were free Black people here who participated in the war from the very beginning. They probably went to the war with their full names, and there was no indication that they were Black people. And so we have more people hidden in plain sight, and we're looking for them. So more research needs to be done to uncover the identity of these individuals, their racial identity, and their contributions to the growth and development of New Jersey's, institutions and principles.
All right. So two things that surprised me. Number one is who Blacks wanted to really win this war, the Revolutionary War, and also the Book of Negroes. So, it's very interesting because, I mean, when you learn like American history, we always know that Black people fought, with the Patriots, but it's even more surprising, like when you look at the numbers, because like 5,000 Blacks fought with the Patriots, but then like 20,000 Blacks fought behind British lines, and then another 100,000 Blacks just walked off, their plantations or away from their owners. But when we look at the numbers of, who fought for the Patriots and who fought for the British, it just becomes really interesting. Like, who did they really want to win this war? Like, so, and so I think that, we just get to ask kind of different questions today. And then the Book of Negroes, right? This book that registered people that left from Manhattan and went up to Nova Scotia. And then those individuals in Nova Scotia, Canada, petitioned to go back to West Africa. And they got permission from the British government to do that. And so, it's just kind of an extraordinary story that is really one of, transnationalism and internationalism. And really Blacks just kind of seeking a place to kind of live their lives as free people. And they have, kind of problems in the Western Hemisphere and to the point that they decide to go back to Africa, which, is just a dynamic story that I think that more people need to know about. So.
Thank you. And thank you both for those points. And as far as the Book of Negroes, one of the things that's really interesting is there are several people from New Jersey who actually end up being a part of the Birch trials in New York and eventually end up leaving to go to Canada and other places. And what is really fascinating to me are the free Blacks who actually fought for a greater opportunity and freedom. I think it's such a deep commentary on societal conditions here. And even though generally, is there a biography of the Birch trial? So the Book of Negroes by the compendium that I read is the one with Graham Russell Hodges, who's as James and maybe Dan know, Dr. Hodges is a great friend of New Jersey Black history and has written about 4 books regarding African American history in New Jersey. I'm not sure. I can chat. I can look it up. And even though generally it's not my practice to recommend other organizations in other states, the Francis Tavern in New York has recently expanded their exhibition on the Birch trials. So I wouldn't say go in there for a visit just for that exhibition, but if you are in Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, definitely go by the Francis Tavern and check out that exhibition. It's very emotional because even after these people fought or they served, they still had to go to a trial and testify for their freedom. And some of them were rejected. And then finally, before we move to the question, I just wanted to make a note. I think it was scholar Stephen Hahn who presented the idea that often when we think of African Americans and revolution, and we compare it to places like Haiti or other places, we generally don't think of African Americans having some kind of participation in a revolution based in war. And what Dr. Hahn, I believe, proposes is that we should think of African American involvement in the Revolutionary War and in the Civil War as African American wages and involvement in warfare as a part of our rebellion process. So when you think of something like the Haitian Revolution, we should start to turn the lens and not think of African Americans as this addenda to the revolution or the Civil War, but rather our movement, our rebellion, and our revolution, which it very much is depicted as in the archive, right? When it's not just, that the loyalists stole them. So let's see, I think there was a question, Rachel.
Yeah, we have 2, and I think one more just came through, so we have 3.
Okay.
The first one is, have you researched the Hug and Rulin families in Gloucester County?
I think that one is for James. I don't know if Dr. Broyld has. So the longer question, James, it's in the chat. I believe it's from Carolyn Williams.
Yes.
Questions about the Hug and Rulin family. Do you think it would be easier? Do you want to answer it, or do you think she should email you at the society? James, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think an email would be fine so I can take a look at the context and see what can be done. Very important that we dig all these things one way or the other. We should all be involved as researchers, as investigative, like journalists do, because that is what it boils down to. So I'll be happy to look at your question and see what I can do in an email.
So James, can you put your email for the Historical Society in the chat, or?
Yes, my email, that's fine. I will send that quickly.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
Carolyn, so I'm sorry. Miss Williams, did you hear James's? Okay, so he's going to put the email in the chat.
My email is in the chat. Thank you.
Rachel, can we go to the next question?
Sounds great. So the next question is, what impacts, if any, of the exclusion of Black people in the Revolutionary War from the written, documented history of the United States do you see in the lives of Black New Jerseyans today, socially, economically, and politically?
Well, I'll say that, you know, this is probably the third time I'm going to say that I see myself in the narrative, and that is very, very, very important that you find yourself. History rewards research. Malcolm X told us several times. It's very important. It gives you the confidence you need. President Kennedy said, history does not give us a key into the future, but it gives us confidence to look in the future. Because if you know your ancestors were part of a cause and they did very well to secure, because it was the shoulders of these nameless individuals or faceless individuals upon whose shoulders the revolution rested, the failure or the success of the revolution rested, that gives you confidence. It makes you comes out with your chest out, very bold to be able to play a role. Because as Martin Luther King once said, when people feel that they have a stake in something, they pay attention to it. Right? So if we can all exhume this history, exhume it, and Black people broadly can feel that this is their history as well, it will be a game changer. It will be a game changer in several ways because we will embrace that. Again, myself, having worked in the archive for more than 20 years, it was just recently that I developed interest in the Revolutionary War because I did not see myself in the narrative. And I know that is exactly what it is for other people. But we should make the effort to embrace that and then institutionally make it possible, like the New Jersey Historical Commission is doing. Kudos to the commission for taking on things like this and making the Black experience, American experience, broadly speaking.
And I also wanted to say, one of the things that I've also noticed is that in these communities, so say, I specialize in Black urban communities, including places like Newark, right? Is that we see a Revolutionary era presence of African Americans here then. We also see Black activism as early as 1801, even though it's complicated by the relationships with whites. In Newark, James and I were discussing by email or by text that whether an association that was created with African Americans, even though it was under white leadership, is it still an African American activist organization regarding another project. But we see the Underground Railroad House, several Black churches that are created in Newark by 1840. And then looking at other places, and we didn't discuss this today, but the Colored Convention, right? So one of their meetings in New Jersey is in Trenton. And these places are also the places where we see African-American communities have developed, often that are portrayed in a negative light, but that have sustained community, church, and other kinds of involvement over the past 200 years. So I think we'll be able to make tighter connections between these development of these communities in the years to come.
I just wanted to add to the kind of a statement of like seeing oneself, because after, the American Revolution, a lot of these Black organizations started to really name their organizations African, right? And I know you guys have the African Methodist Church. I believe it's in Greenwich what is it, Cumberland County in New Jersey. And so these churches that are naming their churches in the African Methodist Church, naming it African, right? And putting African in the name is something that these organizations did, whether they were benevolent societies or churches. So that also kind of symbolizes to us that they seen themselves not perhaps as Americans, but as Africans that have been dispersed throughout the diaspora. So I find it very interesting in kind of seeing oneself in this narrative. I mean, through the Book of Negroes, you have Black people going back to Africa, and then you have all of these African named organizations after the American Revolution. And I find that very interesting that these Black people in a young America are saying, you know, Africa is an important part of our identity and who we are, right? I find that quite dynamic in early America.
Yeah, and definitely, and the only time that you kind of see folks divorcing from the term Africa in some way is as the colonization movement, the movement to move free African Americans to the west coast of Africa, specifically Liberia, that was deeply entrenched here in New Jersey. And so you see people like Reverend Cornish renaming Newark's church, which is actually on the National Freedom Network, the Plain Street Colored Church. He renames it from First African Presbyterian to Plain Street Colored Church, mainly to refute this idea that all Blacks or folks of African descent needed to return to their homeland. And so that's where you see this departure from using the term African during that period is in refute to what's going on with the colonization movement. But again, I'm looking forward to exploring this more.
Yes.
Rachel, is there another question? We have 1 minute left.
We have another question. Is there a breakdown of statistical information by New Jersey counties?
So just to clarify, so a breakdown of Revolutionary War soldiers, or?
That is a great question. Johnny, if you're still with us, if you could clarify in the chat, that would be great.
Did either of you have any reflections on that? We'll see if he has any. According to county, have we broken it out? Has anyone broken it out by county yet?
I'm sorry, is the question about Revolutionary War era, or, you know, what is it, census or?
Yeah.
Well, with these things are bits and pieces out there, of course. As far as African people are concerned, we only go back to census, largely from 1790, to have an idea as to how many people, people of African descent, African Americans, were free or enslaved throughout the period. But there are some local information, and of course, it requires digging. I'll be very happy if you could send me a specific question. I'll look through the archives at the New Jersey Historical Society and see what we can find to answer these questions. Again, these are, you know, we act like, I call myself largely what I do, describe myself as a bulldozer. My work is like clearing a forest, you know, so that, you know, others can level behind me. Because there's so much out there that is unknown. So part of my project is called the unknown unknowns, the things that we have, but we don't know we have them because nobody had extensively looked through to document them. Again, you have to look through the records of agents of enslavement to be able to find information about enslaved people and people of African descent. So there's a lot that is out there. It requires, I think Dan was talking about a labor of love. That's what it is. But anybody who wants to come to archives, again, I can put my information out there if you're not sure. 52 Park Place, Newark, New Jersey. It's a great resource. Together, we can find some of these things.
Great. And also, Johnny, if you could email Dr. Amemasor just to ask him that question. And yes, I would love to encourage everyone to visit the New Jersey Historical Society. They are also one of the New Jersey Historical Commission's longtime grantees. We are proud to support and help sustain many of the organizations, historical organizations throughout the state. And we look forward to continuing our relationship with the folks who are new to the program tonight. So on behalf of the New Jersey Department of State and the New Jersey Historical Commission, I would love to invite you all to also look at the links on the bibliography link. I have also put the link to New Jersey State Library and the New Jersey State Archives, where you can also receive research assistance, as well as the New Jersey Historical Society. And so on the behalf of the commission members and the staff at the commission and the Department of State, I want to thank you. Thank you, Dr. Broyld, for joining us and letting us know about the important work the National Park Service is doing. And I'm eagerly looking forward to continuing to follow it. And a special thanks to Dr. Amemasor for taking on this project and completing this initial stage of our evaluation of how, when, and where we enter. And we look forward to continuing to share these stories in different ways with the audiences of New Jersey and the visitors to New Jersey and throughout the country for the upcoming 250th RevolutionNJ initiative. So thank you and have a good night, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.